Welcome to Lafayette Tales, where a beautiful and a powerful stories come to life. Today's tale takes us to a quiet village beside a river and a mysterious forest full of secrets. When a younger farmer named Enugu meets a strange girl from the forest named Agatha, an unforgettable story begins. Before we start, remember to subscribe to Lafayette Tales for more amazing tales.
Many years ago, there was a small, quiet village in Nigeria that rested beside a wide, calm river. And around this village, the land was green and full of farms where people planted cassava, maize and yams. And every morning, the villagers woke up early while the sky was still soft and pink, so they could go to their farms and work together while the birds sang sweet songs in the trees. Not very far from the village, there stood a very old forest that looked beautiful from the outside, but also made many people feel a little afraid inside their hearts, because the trees in that forest were very tall and their branches were thick and twisted, like long arms that covered the sky so tightly that sunlight could only touch the ground in small golden spots. And the wind that passed through the leaves always made quiet whispering sounds that many villagers believed were not only the voices of the wind. The elders of the village often sat together in the evening when the air became cool and the children gathered around them. And during those quiet evenings, the elders sometimes spoke about the forest in soft, careful voices, while the fire glowed gently in front of them. And they always warned the young people that the forest was not a place for wandering hearts, because strange beings were said to live deep inside it, near the river bend where the water curved like a sleeping snake. In that same village lived a young farmer named Enugu, who was 27 years old and known by many people as a hard-working and kind man who loved the land very deeply. And every morning he walked to his farm with a calm smile on his face while carrying his simple tools over his shoulder and greeting people kindly as he passed by their homes. Enugu enjoyed the quiet life of farming because he loved watching the crops grow slowly under the warm sun, and he often said that the earth spoke to those who were patient enough to care for it gently, which made many elders in the village nod their heads proudly whenever they heard him speak. His farm was located not too far from the river, and sometimes, while he worked, he could see the edge of the great forest standing silently across the fields. And even though many villagers avoided looking at that forest for too long, Enugu often found himself staring at it with a calm, curious mind, as if the tall trees were trying to tell him a quiet story. Many times his family and the older villagers reminded him kindly but firmly that the forest was not a place for young men to explore. And they told him that good farmers stayed close to their farms and their homes, instead of letting curiosity guide their feet into unknown paths. Enugu always listened politely when they spoke, because he respected the wisdom of the elders. But deep inside his heart, he never truly felt afraid of the forest, because whenever the wind moved through the trees and carried its soft sound across the fields, it did not feel like a warning to him, but instead felt like a quiet invitation waiting patiently in the distance. And on one warm afternoon, as Enugu worked alone on his farm, while the sun rested high in the sky and the river moved slowly beside the land, he again lifted his eyes toward the edge of the forest and watched the tall trees sway gently in the wind, not knowing that deep inside that same forest, someone was also watching the village from afar with quiet curiosity. That someone was a young woman named Agatha, who was 23 years old and who lived deep inside the forest near the river bend, where the water curved like a sleeping snake. And this is where the story of the snake girl and the young farmer truly begins. Deep inside the old forest, where the tall trees stood close together and the sunlight touched the ground only in small warm spots, there lived a young woman named Agatha, who was 23 years old and who had spent almost her whole life in that quiet green place near the bend of the river, where the water curved gently like a long sleeping snake resting in the shade. Agatha was not like the people who lived in the village. because while she looked like a normal young woman with calm eyes and long dark hair, when someone saw her from far away, she carried a very special secret that connected her deeply to the forest and the river that flowed beside it. And this secret was the reason she lived far from the busy sounds of human homes. The forest had always been her world, and she knew every tall tree, every quiet path, and every soft sound that lived inside it, because she had grown up listening to the wind whisper through the leaves and watching the river move slowly like a shining ribbon under the sun, while birds and small animals moved peacefully around her. Sometimes in the early morning, when the sky was still pale and quiet, Agatha liked to walk to a place where the forest became thin and the river could be seen clearly flowing beside the open land. And from that place, she could look far away and see the small village resting peacefully beyond the farms, where people woke up early to begin their day. From the edge of the forest, she often watched the villagers from a distance with gentle curiosity, because their lives looked very different from hers, and she sometimes wondered what it felt like to live inside warm homes, share meals together, and laugh around small evening fires, the way she had seen them do many times. Even though she was curious about the village, Agatha never walked too close to it, because she knew that the people there feared the forest and the strange stories that were told about the beings who lived inside it, and she understood that her presence would only make their fears grow stronger. So she stayed hidden among the trees, where the forest protected her quietly, living her days beside the river and moving through the green paths like a calm shadow that belonged to the land. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly over the farms and the warm air carried the smell of growing crops across the land, Agatha slowly walked to the edge of the forest again and stood behind a group of tall trees while watching the open fields with soft, thoughtful eyes. That was when she noticed a young man working alone on a farm close to the river, and he moved with patience and care as he worked the soil, stopping sometimes to wipe the sweat from his face while looking proudly at the growing crops around him. The young man was Enugu, the farmer from the village, who often looked toward the forest with quiet curiosity while he worked. And although Agatha had seen many villagers from far away before, something about this young farmer made her pause longer than usual. She watched him carefully as he worked, noticing how calm he seemed and how gently he treated the land while moving through his farm with steady steps. And she felt a strange feeling growing inside her heart that she had never felt before. For many days after that moment, Agatha returned to the same place near the forest edge while staying hidden among the tall trees, and each time she watched the young farmer working on his farm while the river moved slowly beside him. She did not know why she kept returning to watch him, but something about the way he lived his quiet life made her feel warm curiosity instead of the lonely silence she had always known inside the forest. Meanwhile, Enugu continued his days as usual, planting crops, caring for his farm, and greeting villagers kindly whenever they passed near the fields. But slowly, he also began to feel that something around the edge of the forest was different, as if unseen eyes were quietly watching the peaceful land. Sometimes, when the wind moved through the tall trees at the forest edge, Enugu would pause his work and look toward the green shadows between the trunks, feeling that the forest was holding a secret that had not yet revealed itself. Neither Enugu nor Agatha knew that very soon the quiet distance between the farm and the forest would disappear, and the first meeting between the young farmer and the mysterious girl of the forest would happen beside the calm, flowing river. And that moment would change both of their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. The next morning, the sky above the village was bright and clear, and the warm sunlight slowly spread across the farms, while the birds moved from tree to tree, singing soft, happy songs that welcomed the new day. Enugu arrived early at his farm, like he always did, carrying his tools over his shoulder, while walking along the narrow path beside the river, and as he reached his land, he paused for a moment to watch the quiet water moving gently between the green riverbanks. At first, he thought it was only small animals moving through the forest, but after some time, he slowly looked toward the tall trees and noticed something that made him stop working completely. Standing near the edge of the forest, half hidden behind a tall tree, was a young woman he had never seen before. She was watching the river calmly, and the sunlight that passed through the leaves above her rested gently on her face, while the wind moved slowly through her long, dark hair. For a moment, Enugu did not move at all, because he was surprised to see someone standing so quietly at the edge of the forest, where villagers rarely walked. Agatha also noticed that Enugu had seen her, and instead of running back into the forest like she had done many times before when people came too close, she remained where she was and looked at him with calm, curious eyes. The space between them was filled with silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence, because both of them simply looked at each other with the same quiet curiosity. After a few moments, Enugu slowly walked closer to the river, stopping at a respectful distance so he would not frighten the mysterious girl standing near the trees. With a gentle voice, he greeted her kindly and asked if she was lost or needed help finding the path to the village. Agatha listened carefully to his voice and noticed how calm and friendly he sounded, and she realized that this was the first time she had spoken to someone from the village face to face. She slowly stepped out from behind the tree and told him softly that she was not lost, because she lived in the forest and often came to the river to watch the water flow. Enugu was surprised by her answer, because the villagers had always spoken about the forest as a place where no normal person lived. But as he looked at her standing there peacefully beside the trees, he did not feel afraid. Instead, he felt curious and calm, as if meeting her beside the river was something that had been waiting to happen for a long time. That day, they spoke only for a short while, because both of them were still learning about each other. But when the sun began to move slowly across the sky, Agatha stepped back toward the forest and told Enugu she needed to return home before the evening came. Before disappearing between the tall trees, she looked at him once more and gave a small, gentle smile that stayed in Enugu's mind long after she was gone. And as Enugu returned to his farm that afternoon, he could not stop thinking about the mysterious girl who lived in the forest. The days that followed were quiet and peaceful, but Enugu noticed that his thoughts often returned to the girl he had met beside the river. Every time he worked near the edge of the forest, he found himself looking toward the trees, wondering if he might see her again, standing quietly among the shadows. A few days later, while the afternoon sun rested warmly over the fields, he walked to the river to wash his hands after working on the farm. As he stood beside the water, he suddenly heard the soft sound of footsteps moving through the leaves behind him. When he turned around, he saw Agatha walking slowly toward the river, just like before, and the moment she saw him, she smiled softly, as if she had expected him to be there. From that day, their quiet meetings beside the river slowly became something they both looked forward to. Whenever Enugu finished his work, he sometimes walked to the riverbank and sat near the water, and many times Agatha appeared from the forest and joined him there. They talked about simple things like the animals of the forest, the crops growing on the farm, and the way the river changed its color when the sun began to set. Agatha told him many beautiful stories about the forest paths and the hidden places where bright flowers grew beside the water, and Enugu shared stories about village life and the laughter that filled the evening air when families gathered together. Their friendship grew slowly, like a small plant that receives gentle sunlight every day. But even as their friendship grew stronger, both of them knew that their meetings were a secret that the village would not easily understand. One evening, when Enugu returned home after working on his farm, he found several elders sitting outside, speaking quietly with his family. When they saw him arrive, they greeted him kindly, but soon their voices became serious as they began speaking about the forest near the river. The elders reminded him that many strange stories had always surrounded that forest, and they warned him that wandering too close to it could bring confusion to a young man's heart. They told him that the forest held mysteries that humans did not fully understand, and that it was better for villagers to respect its distance. Enugu listened carefully because he respected the wisdom of the elders, but while they spoke, he remembered the calm smile of Agatha and the peaceful way she talked about the forest. Inside his heart, he felt that the girl he had met was not something to fear. Still, he did not tell the elders about his meetings beside the river, because he knew they would not easily believe him. And so he quietly carried their warnings in his mind, while also carrying the memory of Agatha in his heart. One afternoon, when the sky was covered with soft grey clouds and the air felt cool and gentle, Enugu met Agatha again beside the river. As they sat together, watching the slow water move between the green riverbanks, Agatha became quiet for a long moment, as if she was thinking about something important. Then she slowly turned to Enugu and told him that there was something about her life he needed to understand. She explained that the forest had always been her home, and that she was connected to it in a special way that most humans would not easily understand. She told him that her life was tied to the river and the forest creatures, and that this connection made her different from the people in the village. Even though she spoke softly and calmly, Enugu understood that her words carried a deep truth about who she really was. For a moment, he sat quietly thinking about everything she had said. But instead of fear, he felt something else growing inside his heart, something warm and gentle that made him look at her with even greater respect. He simply told her that everyone in the world had their own story, and that her story did not change the kindness he had seen in her. Agatha looked at him with surprise and quiet happiness, because she had never expected someone from the village to accept her so easily. As time passed, their friendship slowly grew into something deeper. The simple conversations beside the river began to feel more meaningful, and both of them noticed how peaceful they felt when they were together. Enugu admired the way Agatha understood the forest and the quiet beauty of nature, while Agatha admired Enugu's patience and kindness as a farmer who cared deeply for the land. Sometimes they simply sat beside the river without speaking much, watching the sunlight dance on the moving water while birds flew across the sky above them. During those quiet moments, they both understood that their hearts had begun to change. But even as their feelings grew stronger, they both knew that the village and the forest belonged to two very different worlds. After some time, the villagers began to notice that Enugu often walked near the forest edge after finishing his work. At first, they thought he was only enjoying the peaceful riverbank, but slowly, some people began to whisper that something unusual might be drawing him closer to the forest. The elders watched him carefully, remembering the old stories that had been told for many generations. And although no one knew the truth yet, the quiet curiosity of the village was beginning to grow. As the whispers in the village slowly grew stronger, Enugu began to feel the weight of two different paths standing before him. One path was the life he had always known in the village, with his family, his farm, and the people who trusted him. The other path was the mysterious connection he shared with Agatha beside the river and within the peaceful forest. He knew that choosing between these two worlds would not be easy, and deep inside his heart, he wondered if there might be a way for both worlds to understand each other. One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees and the sky became filled with warm golden light, Enugu and Agatha sat together beside the river, just like they had many times before. The water moved quietly beside them, while the forest stood calm and peaceful in the fading light. Both of them knew that their meeting had changed their lives in ways they never expected when they first saw each other from a distance. Agatha understood that even though her home would always be the forest, the friendship and love she had found beside the river had brought a new warmth to her life. Enugu also understood that the world was much bigger and more mysterious than the village stories had once made him believe. And so, the young farmer and the girl of the forest continued to respect the two worlds they belonged to, while carrying the memory of their special bond in their hearts. From that time forward, the forest no longer felt like a place of fear to Enugu, because he knew that within its deep green paths lived someone kind who had once watched the village with quiet curiosity. And the river that curved like a sleeping snake continued to flow gently between the village and the forest, forever carrying the peaceful story of the snake girl Agatha and the young farmer Enugu.
The story may be over, but adventure continues. Subscribe to Lafayette Tales and join us for the next amazing story.